Today, Ingrid and I are very pleased to share the outcomes and learnings from something called the Cultures and Communities Project, which was an initiative funded under Research Data Services, which is a part of the National Collaborative Infrastructure Strategy to provide support for digital tools and access to data in the humanities. I'm just going to introduce the project, talk about the model of 360-degree data sharing that we were working on, and the community engagement challenges of the project. Ingrid will then join us to talk informatics, time and motion study, and provide some of the technical details. And then I will close our presentation by looking to the future and the new humanities and social sciences data-enhanced virtual laboratory that has grown from this project. One of the Cultures and Communities Project's key objectives was to demonstrate a 360-degree data sharing model, to demonstrate a 360-degree model of data sharing between a researcher and their source archive. We recognise the need to make both old and new data discoverable, reusable, and to extract greater value from existing collections that include things as varied as statistical data, manuscripts, documents, artefacts, and audiovisual recordings. Our assertion was that the outputs from a research project can enrich archival data to enable better discovery, accessibility, and increase the likelihood of reuse. This isn't a new or radical idea, and anybody who works at an archive here is like, yeah, of course, that's what we do. And generations of researchers have generously contributed their work back to the source archives that they work with in the form of contributing to finding aids, contributing indexes, and archives have done a fantastic job of incorporating that material into their collections management systems, their records information systems, and also scanning typewritten indexes and sharing them online as well. So what we were wanting to test was whether this could be done as systematic, organised and automated method through a sustainable and scalable open API. The Cultures and Communities project aimed to demonstrate systematic, interoperable and flexible 360-degree data sharing. Achieving this was a technical challenge, of course, but it was primarily a social challenge. Digital solutions were needed to bridge divergent professional practices, and getting to the point of agreeing on that technology was a complex stakeholder engagement process. Cross-community collaboration and buy-in was both pivotal to the project's success, but also became one of the greatest outputs of the project. Oh, hang on, don't show my GIF already. The Cultures and Communities Project worked with researchers at the Griffith University's Prosecution Project. You might have heard of this project before, and their source archives, specifically the Tasmanian Archive and Heritage Office and the Queensland State Archive. The Prosecution Project, which is led by ARC laureate Mark Finane, is a historical investigation into Australia's criminal and judicial history. Digitising and researching court records held in state and territory records and archives collections, and data outputs of this project include the names, dates, offences and co-defendants detailed in those court records, data that is not traditionally recorded in an archival collection system. Making this data available can enable new forms of research through linking collection data based on individuals or events, and can contribute to named entity recognition, which continues to be a big challenge for any kind of collection, particularly archives. Ingrid will go into further detail about the movement of data through the project and the API, but broadly speaking, the data outputs of the Prosecution Project are published via the Cultures and Communities API so that the data can be drawn back into the partner cultural institutions. An API is often described to newcomers to this idea as a digital handshake between systems to facilitate the exchange of information. In this case, the Open API, which is built on an OAI PMH framework, facilitates the exchange of data between platforms which were built to enable differing objectives. In fact, our digital handshake, this API, is in fact the culmination of many, many actual handshakes. We can get preoccupied with the idea that data interchange depends on implementing digital solutions or protocols, but in this instance, one of our key challenges was bridging social and professional protocols. It was primarily a complex collaboration project bringing together researchers, source archives and finding an area of common interest and value in order to motivate these groups to overcome data sharing challenges. This is where I think Gavin and Peter's project was a real introduction because of talking about that gestalt nature of the archive, that difference in whether you need object level description, item level description and the differing practices that researchers might have from the archives that they're working with, and finding a common ground upon which they can work. Cross-community engagement and networking were a central feature of the Cultures and Communities project, and from the outset, the project team sought to have representatives from different stakeholder groups to share in the work program and provide input to strategic opportunities and to tackle these shared challenges. There were two advisory boards, the upper-level steering project advisory board and the technical advisory board, and they were created as strong cross-community support structures to draw in participants and interest and to determine a suitable design for interoperability informatics. Finding that common ground, as I said, meant bridging professional practices and ensuring that all voices were heard. So sometimes creativity was required, so the handshake looked a bit like this, rather than what you might talk about. Oh, it doesn't move. But this process was one of the benefits in itself. The benefits of this approach extend far beyond the successful delivery of this API. Through the process of sharing and resolving challenges through negotiation, we end up having exchanged far more than just data. We end up having exchanged expertise and skill. Best practices are explored and advanced, and more critically, trust is deepened, and there is greater potential to work collectively in the future. Outcomes were shared through regular meetings of all associated bodies, and we had a genuine commitment to a communication plan, including publicly accessible digital humanities pathways events, an e-newsletter whose subscription grows all the time, and this helped foster a shared understanding and sense of value. The approach taken to ensuring the project investments benefits are shared and truly mutually beneficial has had further benefits as we plan the next stage of NCRIS support for this sector, for humanities and social sciences research. And I love this quote up here, which Ingrid has included in the paper that we prepared for this. And we think that what we did was try to strike upon this secret source of collaboration, which is ensuring that the thing you're trying to produce is a thing of value. A strong collaboration will involve good communication. Mutual trust will help foster cooperation, and acknowledgement of participants, including their small wings along the journey, will help the participants to stay motivated and to feel valued. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Ingrid, who's going to talk the nuts and bolts of the situation.
And the good thing is that the nuts and bolts are actually pretty straightforward. There's nothing particularly bedazzling or over-exciting about the informatics in this. So if you snooze, I won't be offended, but really the point is that it takes people to make interoperability happen, and maybe the standards and that kind of thing can follow. So essentially we were trying to provide a feedback loop, and the virtuous circle concept came from Marie-Louise Ayres from the National Library, so that we could actually look at ways of data sharing and collaboration being all built into that same project. So the data interchange, there's a local schema in the prosecution project which is very idiosyncratic, it's not standards-based, and the decision by the technical advisory group was to go with an interoperability schema which is widely used and was also amenable to one of our key partners, Tasmanian Archives and Heritage Office. And so that is actually how the data was exchanged. It wasn't a complex technical process at all. And in some ways, this is a very kind of, bog standard exercise for a lot of cultural institutions, actually taking in material and actually systematising it in some ways. However, the feedback mechanism was something that we really wanted to explore, because we'd had feedback from the community that the research sector, comes and wants material, wants to be able to process it, but none of their outputs, the derived data, actually find their way back into the cultural sector, or not without effort. So we wanted to get this kind of exemplar out there and do it in a very simple way, so that the technical side of this was not taxing, but the process of engagement was really rich and built trust between the partnerships. So that's what it was like at the very beginning, where there was a bit of manual exchange of files and metadata and that kind of thing. And then by the end, the manual side of things had dropped away and a more automated data exchange process had occurred. Go ahead and read the paper if you want to get into the details, but no joke, it's not rocket science. But what also this allowed us to do is to actually look at what happens when a researcher actually wants access to archives that are actually in multiple institutions. Very rarely does a research question get conveniently answered by one set of archives. So we wanted to look at where the researcher was and where the archives were that that team wanted access to, the kind of time involved in negotiating getting access to that, whether there was user guides out there for them to be able to know how to articulate what they wanted from that archive. And we wanted to look at, the nuts and bolts in some ways of the costs. Who was doing what needed to be paid for, and what skills were involved. So a time and motion study, very kind of ad hoc on our part, was also part of this process. We want to know what happens when research is contingent on getting access to digital collections, and what happens when material is not digitised or is digitised but not readily available online. And I guess these are rules of thumb, if you like, for access to digitised material that became very obvious in this exercise working with the Prosecutions Project. No request for access is exactly the same, you all know that. Negotiation takes time, whether it's face-to-face or machine-to-machine. That, as I've said, questions are really answered by one set of resources, and that they need to be blind to whether a resource is physical or digital. And that getting access to specialists, like a curator's time or a technical support person's time, can make this process work much faster. So there are, I guess, tactics that people need to have under their wing when they want to undertake these research exercises. So we looked at the workflows, what was going on, where the data was coming, how it was being packaged up, and who was involved in that process, to actually look at what was the fastest way for Mark Finane, who led the prosecution project, to get access to that archival data. And so there were 4 institutions that we looked at. I'm just going to give you a couple of the workflows. So with Tahoe, Mark got on a plane, he went down, someone on the Tahoe side copied the files onto the hard drive. I'm sure there was conversation, and that hard drive went into the bag and back with Mark up to Brisbane. Whereas with State Records South Australia, because they had the ability to put the material up onto an FTP point, there wasn't travel involved, there was an email exchange, and it reduced the time. So you get the simple picture. The more that data is conveniently made available and the right people are in the conversation, those archives can fly. Same thing. So from a data curation point of view, in 3 of the 4 instances, data had to be packaged on the institution side. However, item C on this was the National Archives Collection API, and in this instance it meant that there was instant access to that material. So in 3 out of the 4 instances, the negotiation time took longer because the material wasn't conveniently available online. So there are time and costs associated with this. I work for AARNet. We have a very big network for research and education. We want it used. We want people to get off portable hard drive as much as possible. #beyond sneakernet. And the fastest instance of transfer was both FTP and through the use of Cloud Store. And A&D involved travel and hard drives. So you can see that the more and more we have research like this coming into the sphere, the more we need to actually look at what's going on to make it work faster. So there's some real lessons learned, none of which will surprise you. That physically remote, when the data is physically remote, there's more time. When there's limited access to networks and cloud storage services, it takes more time. When there isn't enough guidance information or you don't get access to the right person, it takes more time. And if you can't get their time, it takes more time. So I guess the takeaways for you is that access to cultural collections is ad hoc and highly inefficient for the research sector. And that there is a myth of self-service. Roxanne mentioned today about the fly-by researcher, the one that comes armed with their mobile phone, snap, 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 and then gets on a plane or a bus and goes to the next institution. There's a strong likelihood of wheel reinvention, same people copying the same material, because we don't coordinate in this space. And we don't have a program called Digitisation for Research, which actually looks at all those inefficiencies of time and the priorities of the players together to see how this could work more efficiently. And also that digitisation skills lie in the cultural sector, not in the hands necessarily of the research sector. So I'm going to hand back to Alexis.
Yep. Going okay for time, yeah? Great. So, so as I mentioned, this is the part where we look forward at what happens next. I'm very pleased that I'm not the first person I've seen mention the NCRIS roadmap today. So if you saw Roxanne's presentation earlier, she talked about the 2016 National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Strategy roadmap, which identified that there is significant underinvestment in the humanities, arts and social sciences sector after 10 years of NCRIS, and acknowledged that only relatively small-scale national research infrastructure currently exists. The roadmap also identified institutional portals and facilities that could be leveraged, including Trove and the Australian Data Archive. It called for improved interoperability and states that enhanced access to national and state collections will be critical for future HAS research. Very fortunately, that's what our partner people in the Cultures and Communities project were also saying. I see Roxanne nodding at the back there. The teams that coalesced around the Cultures and Communities project have delivered this additional benefit as part of the project, as they were able to articulate a vision under the next stage of NCRIS funding, which has proven very handy. The project has provided a stimulus and a focus for conversations about research support for the HAS sector through what was essentially a small project, the delivery of an API, but the impact of that being able to get people on the same page and start to talk the same language and start to talk about the importance of talking the same language has been particularly helpful. The community that has grown around it has been able to identify where we align and where we diverge. Advisory bodies and project teams have been able to identify and scope common challenges and opportunities to affect change. And so I'll show you this, which is the product of a great deal of brainstorming and revision and that sort of thing, where our steering committee talked about the humanities research community and the social sciences research community, places where they work differently, places where they worked in common, and named identifiable points at which we could assist in this process to accelerate research, and these were the things which were put forward to request for further HAS funding in this sector. Many other disciplines have been supported under the NCRIS framework. If you're not familiar with that framework, it's the kind of thing that funded the synchrotron, that funded the National Computing Infrastructure, that funded the Pawsey supercomputer and all those sorts of things. The HAS sector is not able to call for a single major instrument or a multi-million-dollar tool to accelerate research outcomes, and that's been our difficulty, and that's why we've been underfunded up to this point, because nobody can say this is the big ticket item that we want. The Cultures and Communities project has been able to articulate a vision which is of clusters of tools responding to common needs, loosely coupled together and complemented by spaces for sharing exemplar workflows and multi-layered skills training and peer mentoring opportunities. So that map turned into something that looked a bit like this, which is what we're calling the Humanities and Social Sciences Data Enhanced Virtual Laboratory. Catchy title, I know. It might stick with you. The HAS Devil will bring together fragmented tools, data and services into a shared workspace. The broad-based multi-partner team will work on accessible tools around the challenges of transcription, text analysis and data curation, with the goals of lowering the barriers to entry for HAS infrastructure and increasing interoperability between existing HAS platforms. This will be accompanied by skills and training activities and a pathways program to ensure that the benefits of this program are appreciated by the broadest possible community. So the inevitable question, how can I get involved? Because I want to be part of this. I would strongly encourage you to subscribe to the Cultures and Communities email list. We send out a monthly email at the end of every month, and everything we do will be shared on there. Watch this space, essentially, for training modules, pathways, events and platforms for sharing data and tools. I'll be very frank, we have started talking about this in the closing months of last year, and we're not quite there yet. So we have a big project kick-off meeting coming up in the next couple of weeks, and there will be a great deal coming along after that. But I also would like to perhaps flag a couple of important dates this year with you, because this community should really be involved in both of these events. The Digital Humanities Australasia Conference, which happens every 2 years and is led by the Australasian Association for Digital Humanities, will be happening in Adelaide from the 2nd to the 5th of October. That's the URL. The call for proposals has been circulated. They will be welcomed from the 26th of February. And if you are thinking about 2019, many of you might be familiar with DARIA, which is the European Digital Humanities Support Program that was funded by the European Union. As part of the delivery of their tools and workflows and things like that, they are actually socialising their work through a series of 3 workshops. One's going to be held at the Library of Congress in the US, one's going to be held at Stanford University in the US, and one's going to be held in Adelaide in March next year. So you should put that in your diaries as well. So that's the full, that's what I've got to promote today. And yes, basically keep your eye out for the products that come out of this HAS Devil. We anticipate a range of things which can be consumed in the form of online modules, face-to-face workshops, pathways events in cities around the country, and improved interoperability and access to cultural data. Yes. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? There's a bit of time, so feel free to have some questions.
I'm going to go for it. Can you, I'm sorry to go, there was, I think, 3 slides back before you got to the HAS Devil.
Yep.
What was that?
What was one? Two.
That one.
That one. Okay,
Yeah.
so it. You don't need to read it all very closely.
Okay.
My point is, so when we got a group of people around the table, and when we talk about the steering committee of the Cultures and Communities project, we're talking about researchers from at least 4 different universities, people from Trove, people from Melbourne University Archives, people from a range of other cultural institutions and that. And we said, what is it? So if we were going to turn around and say to Ingrid, what are you going to give us $1 million for? What would we ask for? And everyone goes, no, our community is too diverse. We work in a ground-up fashion. The researchers, you know, we're talking about lots of small projects. And we went, well, if we wanted to inject money into this sector to accelerate research outcomes, where could we have the greatest impact? And so that group of steering committee, which brought together researchers, collection managers, eResearch support services, said, all right, well, this is what humanities people do. This is what social sciences people do. There are some spots in the middle there where they do similar or the same things, or where a tool could actually help both of these communities. And that's what this spaghetti map is. So don't pay too much attention to it. Don't watch it too closely, because but what it was the ability to articulate thinking like that could guide the decision making about what we would target. I mean, resources are limited. We're never, as much as my closing statement sounded like it, we're not going to be everything to everyone. We needed to target some key areas that were going to have the greatest impact across the HAS community, and that turned out, on the basis of this map, to be transcription, text analysis, geocoding and data curation, all accompanied by shared workflows, skills and training. That's it, yeah.
I've just got one comment to make. When we pitched this paper, it was actually not to, as I said, bedazzle people with informatics and sophisticated technologies, and that's why Gavin and Peter's paper is so profound, because very small changes. I remember having a bit of a debate about how significant the technology that connects to the file sender API is, because it's not a lot of programming, but it has a massive impact when it's combined with the policy decision making around how you make mediated access to archival collections work in a systematic way. And with the last year's project, we had the same thing: very small developments, not trying to push everybody too fast, too far, but actually trying to build community, essentially. So I really hope the message that people take away from here is that we hope to get some marks on the board so that archival collections can be better processed in research. Peter, you're going to jump in. Good.
Yeah,
Speaking of building community.
I was about to say, I found it really hard to articulate what Dads did, because it is such
Yep.
a small thing from an IT perspective.
Yep.
It started out as one file of code. It's grown more than that.
Yep.
But I understand what you mean in terms of one from little things, big things grow.
Sorry to go.
No, go on.
It goes back to what we were talking about the special sauce to do with collaboration and that ability to articulate shared value and mutual benefit to everyone, but also in that quote, one of the important things is celebrating the wins along the way for the participating parties. So that was what our API was able to do, was say, well, we brought these people to the table, they were able to agree on something, and that's how we envision the forward planning. And look, the NCRIS report that we're talking on is talking about the next decade. We're funded for the next year. So as much as the Cultures and Communities project has informed the next year, we hope that the next project, the HASTEV, will inform the years coming after that as well.
Because what we have in spades, we're not a thingatron, but we are a massive, massive community. Together, we have massive cultural collections. We have, I think, potentially the biggest range of researchers. So from a count point of view, we have that in spades, but we actually have to learn to work together.
And we're all here, and I keep hearing about this term serendipity, and I guess the work that we've done is based on that serendipity, and why we're actually here to speak to you is to try and get some more of that serendipity, to collaborate more. So if we can just build off that, we don't need the thingatron. We need this serendipity. We need to see what we've all got in common. I don't want to sound trite, but I just keep seeing more and more of that, and it works.
It's actually the easiest project I have ever worked on. No joke.
All right, well, thanks for that explanation
Thank
and
you. I'm
the
just gonna
informal
pop-
panel discussion. Great.
We do actually have time for another couple of questions if anyone else has anything. No? Okay. Can I just make a little comment? I love the fact that we're talking about something as tiny and really technical as data, and eventually it all comes back to community and collaboration, no matter what, and that's what our industry is all about. Doesn't matter how technical you are, it's community and collaboration. One more question? Yeah.
Sorry, one question. Thank you very much for your presentations. So I guess in terms of vision, you've talked about the funding in Europe and the US to develop some amazing initiatives. And in the long run, with the digital virtual lab, I mean, we're using standards and we will aim to be interoperable with inside. Do you think that there's real scope for some visionary projects connecting things across the world? I mean, Gavin talked about many distributed collections. We've just had a researcher who's identified we have part of a missile that's part of 40 different collections. And this is just going to be golden. We've got to achieve it somehow.
We need more case
You both
studies.
want to make a comment about this.
I think we need more case studies. So I'm part of HASTEV, and
Yep.
it's like we need applied
All of
projects. So come to us. It's like we've got a concept in mind of what the platforms are going to be, but to do what you're talking about, we actually need practical case studies. We need people on the ground to actually help.
Because if you think of the synchrotron, it's this big, and we are trying to push up.
I think, what we need in the humanities, because I think I was possibly one of the people that coined the term thingatron many years ago, is the little bitatron, which is the thing that we're building now. But I mean, I've been involved in development of archival standards for quite some time, and I'm currently involved in the International Council on Archives Experts Group on Archival Description. We are trying to pull together this new thing called Records in Context, which actually pulls together all the existing archival standards. And one of the things that we're putting into RIC is this whole notion of how we could systematically capture data about access, conditions of access, conditions of use, and also that content sort of notices things, so that we can get the community to start to systematically putting that sort of data there so it can be used in the DADS environment, so it's there ready to go. And I think that's probably the next thing that we will look at, is saying, okay, we've cobbled together this proof of concept, but where can we put that data about access conditions and use in a way that DADS could just go and grab that metadata about stuff and say, these two come together, this is what you've got to sign up to if you want to get a copy of those materials. And I think the whole notion of getting a copy of those materials, when we first put this to archivists, they went, oh, no, you're giving stuff away. But they hadn't actually stepped back and thought, but that's what we've always done. That's what the archive reading room is all about. It's people getting the information from the records. They're either reading it and remembering it, they're either writing notes, they're either taking photographs of it, they're asking for photocopies or whatever, that they're always taking away. And all we're trying to do is bring productivity gain to that and say, here they are, but under these conditions. And I think there's a real big productivity gain, which means
So
we
I
can.
just wanted to leave one thing as well to question is blockchain thinking. So it's not one copy that someone else has, but it's universally distributed. Do you see that as one of the golden opportunities?
I'm
And we can,
I'm happy to jump in.
I'm going to say one thing about
This
blockchain.
might be something for afterwards, and people want to make their way downstairs.
Thank you.
Thank you.